Sound speeds, and welcome to Speed Bumps yet again. Driving home in rush hour, because that's the way we do things, isn't it? We are doing everything the same way as before. We have our sound, which is the BPTRX from Deity, which is right up there. We have the Deity WLA Pro right up there, providing our sound, and that's going in and being recorded on the Deity, which is great. It is tan in color because Andrew never sent me a black one, but that's okay. I'm not going to hold any grudges. Yeah, I joke, but in all honesty, I understand. You know, I did the review of the tan color was the one that was out on the Pro when I reviewed it, and so I just continue to do things the way I do it. Still using the Insta360, but this week I'm doing it in not in 4K mode. I'm doing it in 5.7K. Because I learned that the resolution of a net regular 4K image is being stretched to 360 whenever you do whatever the resolution is on the Insta360, which is why you can have basically a 4K image, but the whole 360 is stretched out to be recorded on 4K. So I'm trying the 5.7K to see if those extra little bits of pixels are going to help when it comes down to stretching an image all the way around. I want you to basically realize that it is still daylight, and we're now approaching summer, so it's getting to be light even at this time of day. Actually, you know what? Let's add more light just to see what happens there. So are we going to increase the quality of our picture by having additional light? We'll see. I'll get sunburned on the top of my head, but whatever, it doesn't matter. If you look around this vehicle right now, you're going to see something kind of cool. You're going to see I happen to have a bunch of boom poles right down there. I have the jumbo pole, which is a 36-foot long boom pole. You've seen in a couple of my videos, like it was featured in the NTG8 video, which was really cool because I was able to take it to brand new heights. As I understand it, this may be the only one in America, and if not, it might be the only one in America that's being used in the film industry at least. So it's kind of cool there. Specialty gear, gotta love it. That was the class of the topic of today's class. Side note: at 9 a.m., which is when the class started, nobody had shown up that was enrolled for it. That irritated me a bit, but the two people that did show up had an interest in sound. Neither one of them were in sound, so what I did is I said, you know what? Let's not have a class that's on topic. And they saw all the gear. I mean, I have everything from a prototype boom pole to a piece of gear that basically is, I mean, it's everything with specialty. But I said, let's not do a video that's on topic today. Let's do a video instead that's tailored to what you want. So I said, you tell me what you want to learn about sound. You're going to have yourself a private class. We went back and forth answering their questions until one guy was like, I'm good. So he left just after lunchtime, about maybe 12:30 or 1. And the other guy stayed with me until 4 o'clock. And then he was asking questions all day and just loving it. By the time it ended, he was thrilled to death. This is why you should not talk while you try to drink out of a bottle. I swear, I can't do anything. Like a child. Okay, let's not waste any more time and let's get right into the episode before I drive off the road. For the first topic of today, I thought I would answer a question that I've answered many times in the real world, but I don't know that I've done it in a streamlined form on sound speeds, and that is cabling boom poles. What are the advantages and disadvantages of different cabling options? Let's start with completely uncabled. You have yourself a microphone in a shock mount on the front end of a boom pole. You hold it when it's extended. You have to get the microphone signal from the microphone signal. You have to get the signal from the microphone to the mixer. And by the mixer, I mean the person or the mixer, recorder, interface, whatever. You have to get the microphone signal to whatever it is. Okay? Now, there's different ways of doing that. If you put a transmitter on the boom pole, and it is an uncabled boom pole, then the only option really there is to go through a little shorty from the microphone to put the transmitter on the microphone end. Or if your shock mount has a place where you can connect up straight up to it, like a cube style transmitter or something like that, you can do that as well. Now, if you are putting a transmitter on the boom pole otherwise, then it involves a different cable configuration, so we'll get into that later. But let's talk about uncabled booms if you are having to cable to your mixer. Well, what you need to do is add a strain relief, first of all, to whatever cable you connect up to right underneath the microphone. That way that you're not having any extra play in the cable slapping the side of the boom pole, because that will create noise. Now, if you run an XLR down, the cable goes down the boom pole, then you have two different options: internal or external straight cable, or wrapping an external coiled cable. Let's talk about straight cable. If you extend out the boom pole and you're basically holding it the entire time as you extend it, you can rotate the boom pole in your hands, which then takes it and corkscrews it around. That is one option. If you use a straight cable, some people will say don't do that. So what you'll do is, before you start to extend out the pole, you throw a couple of coils around it. That way, as you extend it, it holds snug to the boom pole. That usually is preferred by some pros, because it means that you're not adding a twist and torquing the cable as it goes around, perhaps stretching it. That way you're doing it and you're extending the pole out, and it kind of is looser as it straightens out. Once you end up straightening out the boom and get it where you want to, you pull it taut and you hold it in place. You can also get yourself a clip or a clamp that actually holds onto the butt end of the boom also. Now, some people, not pros, will say that what you should do is go to the knuckles, or leave an area of the boom pole that you actually tape the cable down to the boom pole when it's extended all the way. When you collapse it, you have to leave a little bit of a gap, because that's where the tape goes in. But then you basically will have these big crazy looking loops, hanging off the boom pole like it's a super techno crane. The reason why pros don't do that is because it's sloppy as crap. You shake it around, you could have a big coil looping down on a segment of a boom pole that's 4 feet long. You would have it hanging down by 2 feet over the course of, if it's collapsed all the way, and then you have all that stuff in front of you. Annoying. You don't want to deal with that. So the other option that you have, if you do a cable that's externally wrapped, is coiled. If you coil cable and external wrap boom, you do the same thing. You add a spiral. But what you can do is add a clip onto both sides of it, and then as you extend it, all you have to do is just make sure that the pole has a slight spiral in it, and it will hold itself tight to the boom pole at all times. Now, regardless of the way you do it, the cable should spiral around the outside of the boom pole. If you do this, then what happens is, by holding it snug, you're not going to have any cable noise hit the boom pole if you do it right. And that means that that cable configuration makes it the quietest cable configuration. Plain and simple. Now, the next quietest configuration would be internal straight cable. Now, this cable configuration requires what's called a flow-through, where you have to have an opening in the base of the boom pole near the butt of the end. So that way the cable feeds into the boom pole, and then it will go up the middle all the way up, and then you have to break out at the tip of the boom pole in order to go into the microphone. When you do that, that opening on the inside of the boom pole allows in dirt and dust. And if you just let your cable fall and hit the ground, and then you pull it on the inside of the boom pole, that makes the inside of the boom pole dirty. So be aware of that, because you don't want to have a dirty inside of your boom pole. It's going to gunk up. It's going to start to be bad. But if it rains, it will dry out quicker inside. But then if it rains, you don't lock your knuckles when you go to store it. Otherwise, it could seize. So if you have an internal straight cable boom, you run your cable through, and it's going to be dirtier than the other configurations, either an uncabled boom, which is a closed system, or having an internally coiled cable boom. And it's because of the opening. Now, the reason why this is the second quietest configuration is because a boom pole that has this diameter with a thin little cable would roll and make less, it would touch less parts of that boom pole with less surface area. And you can actually, move the boom around quicker, and it will roll and slide without potentially bouncing back and forth on the inside, or springing like you would run into with a coiled cable. But don't let me get ahead of ourselves just yet. Now, cable management is a thing, is a reality. Go vertical with the boom pole and then collapse it, no problem. The cable falls down flat and even. If you have to horizontally retract the boom pole, what you end up running into then is the cable could bunch up on the inside. If it's a very thin cable, then you're definitely going to run into bunching up, because as you start to retract the boom pole, it could end up spiraling and basically bunching up, because if the cable gets pulled at all or torques at all on the inside, it could have a little bit of a sticking point where it's going to get caught on the inside of a knuckle. And if that happens, could be bad. So you could end up having it bunch up where you can't collapse a segment, and then you're like, okay, how do I get this thing collapsed? Because obviously if you're doing a horizontal retraction, it's because it's done for a reason. So at that point you have to find a way, when you're tired no less, trying to collapse the boom pole, you have to hold the boom, anchor it, and you have to start pulling the cable through the butt end of the microphone, which is the butt end of the cable, which is annoying. Now, here's the trade-off if you use a thicker cable. You're not going to ever run into bunching, or at least you probably won't, but it is going to be a little heavier because cables do weigh. Copper has weight to it. And so as a cable extends out, if it's a thinner cable, it will be lighter, but a heavier cable will have more rubber to it or more shielding, which is metal, and it will weigh more. So you got to be aware of both configurations and what you want to do and how. So that does matter. Now, that is the second cable option that you have, and the second quietest. The noisiest cable configuration is, to many people, the most convenient and probably the easiest, and that is internally coil cabling your boom pole. Now, this means that you're going to have a spiraled cable going down the inside of your boom pole, which if you push it in and out really fast, it could end up with a slinky type sound, springing back and forth, causing noise. Or if you do quick movements, it could roll and start slapping in multiple different places, because it's not like a cable that just lays there and slides as one big thing in one little bitty point. You could end up having all that movement causing different bouncing back action of a coiled cable. Also, if it's extended out all the way and you slap it around there, you could end up having some springing action of it springing back and forth and bouncing just a little bit. So the internal coiled cable is very convenient. And depending on the end that you have on the butt end of your boom pole, if you take, like, if, for example, you have a K-Tech boom with a CCR, which is coiled cable right angle where it comes out the side of the boom pole. Don't have one of those here because I have multiple booms. It would basically be, the boom pole comes down and it goes straight and connects up to the side of it in a right angle. Well, when that happens, it's going to be connected up in one place on the end of the boom pole where it adds a counterweight. That's the advantage of having a transmitter mounted to your boom pole, but on the butt end. It's going to be counterweighting the microphone a little bit. So it will feel lighter on your leading hand. Now, the other option, if it's not that, would be straight on the end of the boom pole. Just mounted, like the end of the boom pole comes here, and you just mount the transmitter straight to the end of it. The disadvantage of that is that if you put it down on the ground, you're putting it literally on the transmitter. You don't want to do that. So if you don't do that, but you still have the connector coming out the end, then you need to have something more like the the 180 degree angle where it lays on this little piece of metal that Loom used to call a wing. But other brands, I think K-Tech is the only other company that has it. Maybe Ambient does too. I think K-Tech is the only one. But if it happens to have that right angle where the transmitter literally connects up vertically, and it would be laying against the ground. So that's another cable option that you have on some brands of boom pole. But it is the noisiest configuration, but in the hands of a pro, you could basically work with anything. So you just got to be aware of that those are a few different configurations for your cable and what to be aware of in each of those situations. The next topic I'm going to talk about is going to be directed towards camera people. Well, sound people too, but mainly camera. If you have one person that is going to be running your entire camera team, here's what I will tell you. It is strongly advised that if you had an option between choosing a camera person that can also do sound or a sound person that can also do camera, it is better for you to do the sound person that can also do camera than the camera person that can also do sound. Let me justify this for you. If you are dealing with a big budget show, $250 million Marvel movie, for example, it's all about picture. They got to get the shots right, super techno cranes everywhere, spider cams, all the cable cams, everything. They're all over the place. Cable cameras and stuff all over the place for multiple different actors, multiple different cameras, different coverage all over the place. If they don't get a shot, when you end up going into ADR and you say this is going to cost you $350 an hour, plus the cost of the actors. Well, all the actors are already on contract. So it's $350. Let's just say that's the price for a studio to do ADR. And then you're prepping the ADR that's going to be done, and you need to replace that audio. Let's just say that you have to replace it, and so that's the situation. Anything you ADR, $350 an hour, is going to be like chump change to Marvel. They don't care. But if that's the cost of doing proper ADR, yes, I know there's apps that you can use on your phone. Yes, I know there's more subtle ways of doing it, but this is a particular service. Let's just say that the cheapest way to do it would be $150 an hour. Let's say by the time you prep everything and get everything ready and you do it at a studio or something like that, or you just do it at your house or whatever. Let's just say that the cost is even 50. Let's just call it 50. Okay, $50 an hour. If you have to ADR 20 hours worth of your movie, that's what it takes. 20 times 50, and you're talking about how much? You're adding on to your budget about $2,000. So $2,000 is what you're adding on to the budget of your movie by doing that. Is that right, math? 20 times 50. No, it's $1,000. $1,000 to fix sound, and that would be if you're doing it as, you know, a very, very streamlined way, but you still want to have a decent quality, still want it to be, you know, so you're charging someone who's not nearly, giving you the steal of the century, basically, a very, very discount deal. If you do that kind of a thing, and it's costing you $50 an hour, if that is $1,000 you didn't need to cover, let's say your whole entire budget was $1,000, then you are going to basically double your amount of money that you're charging, that the movie is going to cost you by the time it's all said and done. DaVinci Resolve has great tools that you can use for making camera footage look good. Sound too, but it's got to start off sounding good. There was a time a few years ago, where one of my friends who's a camera person called me up and she said, Alan, got to ask you a question. Can you watch my movie, my short movie that me and some friends spent, you know, a few $1,000s on, and let me know what you think? And I said, okay. And I watched it, and there was a lot of places that had no sound, and it sounded like a camera mic. I heard very bad sound coming from camera fans and other weird sounds, and sometimes it was very low and very noisy. And so when I watched the movie, it was like a pre VFX version. I was like, is this picture locked? And she said, yeah, it is. I'm like, okay, what happened to the sound? She's like, that's what we had. And I said, why didn't you hire a sound person? She says, we did, but we hired someone who was cheap. I'm like, yeah, so what do? Sometimes they just turned on the camera mic. Sometimes they recorded stuff and said it didn't turn out. It's like, so she said, what's it going to take to fix this? I said, a complete sound redesign. I said, you're going to have to ADR every bit of it, because not a bit of this audio is useful. You're going to have someone that's going to be very clever with the design of their sound, because it involved VFX and special effects and stuff. It was going to have sound effects, sound library, you know, sound effects recordist, you know, re-recording or whatever. It could be the same person piecing together those things to basically create a sound design. And it's going to have music, it's going to have everything, but some of that stuff you'd expect to have in post, but not a complete ADR and a complete rebuild of the sound from scratch, compensating with Foley for the places you needed to. And when I told her, I said, why did you hire that person? She said, it's who we could afford. And I said, well, unfortunately to tell you, because you hired that person and your audio is so bad, it's going to cost you thousands to fix it. Guess what happened in that movie? Think about it. Tell me. They scrapped it. They completely had to 86 the entire movie. All the money they spent, it's not going to amount to anything. I told her, I said, if you want to save it, make a music video out of it. I mean, that way it's less than ideal, but at least you still could do all the VFX and stuff and just have it to an original movie, to find a local artist that wants to have their name connected to it. This is my video, man. It's so cool. It's about an alien, and just anyway. That would be one option. Or you could just do it and have terrible sound, and that's your option. When I was younger, I was, I think, 17. I was a shooter. This is before I really started learning a whole lot about sound. I was 17 years old and asked to do a project for school. And I did all the camera work. I was part of the writing team. I was part of the, I was not really directing, but I worked with the director to basically produce this. I produced three short movies for the school. It was a performing arts school. One of them was for my class. And it was only two people in the class. It was me and a different person every single semester. It was basically, they felt like it would be bad to have a one-on-one class between a student and a teacher. That was the last year they did that particular class because it was the only person registered. And they said, throw somebody else in there. That way it's not a one-on-one. That was their justification. So every single person that they threw in there every semester, every quarter of the 3 quarters, had no idea what in the world was going on. Did the material, but it was like, yeah, this isn't what I want to do. I'm just taking it because it's easy. Screenwriting is not easy, but anyway, it was funny. So I basically produced this video with the school. The audio was so horrendous because I did not prioritize it. I made a very bad mistake. I was not doing sound. I basically said, okay, I'll plug in a cable into the camera, and I basically we found a hard rubber tube, and we jammed a microphone goose arm into it with a clip on the end of it, and I was like, it's rubber, it'll be fine with whatever, just have the cable going through. And it was a dynamic microphone. It was basically done exactly wrong. I mean, looking back in retrospect, and I gave that put it in the hands of someone that didn't know what to do or how to do it, and it was an omnidirectional pattern microphone too, so it picked up like garbage. Then I basically went down that through a headphone extension cable is what Radio Shack sold it as at the time. It was a TRS to a TRS 20-foot cable, and then it ran in and plugged into a mono microphone input. And because it was not put in all the way and it did not make a proper connection, it buzzed every single take of the entire movie. In addition to shooting it, I also, I lined up all the shots and did things like that that I needed to for the shot. In addition to shooting it, though, it was all basically stationary cameras. Very little movement, but sometimes it involved movement. I set up the shots, and then I was also the star of the show, the male lead. And there was a female lead. She was the real star of the show, but I was her boyfriend in the movie. The reason this was bad is because our audio buzzed so bad, it scrapped our entire project. We had 3 classes. There was 2 advanced drama classes that their video I basically shot, and I was hands-on. It was acted by the drama classes, and that was in the screenwriting directing. My project did not turn out because my sound was so bad. Very first time I produced a project for this school, it did not work out. We had to scrap it because of bad audio. Plain and simple. So if that right there does not tell you audio is important, then nothing else will. Now, what does this mean when it comes down to trusting a sound person to do your camera over a camera person to do your sound? It's because a camera person that does sound is probably going to say, I'm concentrating on the camera settings, I'm concentrating on this and that and the other to make sure that this looks as good as possible. And then as long as I have a microphone, it's going to work just fine. Just hit record, whatever, it's going to be fine. If you trust a sound person to get your camera done, camera will still look good. Camera is more forgiving. If a white balance isn't right, it can be corrected in post. If something is not done exactly right or a little shaky, they can stabilize it in post. If something is a little bit off an angle, guess what? That's the trend where people do the most wacky framing imaginable on some of these shows, and it's considered to be artistic. If a microphone has scratch in it or a boom is off axis, is that a creative decision? No, it's not. It sounds bad. Everyone knows it sounds bad. The audio has to be replaced, or you're going to have to deal with it. So I would rather have a sound person that is going to know how to maximize and get good sound, learn the basics on camera, so that way they learn that basically it's about ISO, f-stop, shutter speed, and focus. That's the main things you got to understand about camera. Yes, I know there's other things, but as long as you understand those 4 big things, you're probably going to get a usable image as long as the resolution and stuff are set right at the right frame rate. That's all stuff that you'll basically have set up in general. But as long as you understand those 4 things, you're probably going to be able to turn out something that post will be able to save. If you don't know how to properly place a lav or a boom, or you don't have it set up correctly, your sound clips, your sound is bad, it's going to sound very generic, it's going to sound bad, post is going to have a nightmare cleaning it all up, and it's going to be worse. I would much rather you trust, and this is for anyone that does camera, learn sound. That way you understand what is needed and logistically what is required for you to properly do sound. If you are a sound person, know some of the basics about camera, and between me and someone else paying the same rate, I would rather hire a sound person that understands the basics about camera than a camera person that understands the basics about sound, because you're going to end up with better results. So there you have it, another episode of the Speed Bumps Podcast in the can. Thank you for tuning into this episode, and I will see you in 2 weeks with yet another episode.
If you'd like to ask a sound-related question to be answered in a future episode, send text, audio, or video to ssp@soundspeeds.us. Want to record this outro? Details in the description below. Find us on social media and online at www.soundspeeds.us. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for more sound-related content.